If we had to spend 200 years on a planet, do you think we'd find our love?
Only if you're wearing a deep V.
Think about how horrible our children would be. Our descendants, can you imagine?
I'd rather not imagine, to be honest with you.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Keith and Mike Watch Star Trek Deep Space Nine. Today we're talking about Season 5, Episode 22, Children of Time. Speaking of time, we're dropping a day late, because we felt a little weird recording and dropping on the anniversary of 9/11. So here we are. Just think, at this point, you wouldn't have had any of our nonsense, but now you do. So it's just late. Mike, how's it going?
It's going well. Our hearts and thoughts and prayers and love to all of those still dealing with the fallout from 9/11. I know that's not it's not over for many folks. Never will be. Also, Keith, we were talking offline about fun life stuff, but speaking of fun life stuff that might actually be tangential to the actual show we do.
Oh.
I came across on Amazon Prime streaming this morning. It was released in 2023 or 2022. There's a whole 8-episode docuseries on all of Trek, from Roddenberry's initial ideas to current Trek.
Really?
I think it's called The Center Chair.
Fun. I've never even heard of it.
Let me see. Amazon Prime streaming Trek series. Will that do it?
I don't know.
Nope, definitely not. I'm gonna look at it as you do any business you have.
Well, I'll say this. I'm actually watching a Trek documentary right now. Adam Nimoy Searching for Spock.
Okay.
About the son of Leonard Nimoy, because I'm going to be we think doing an interview panel with him on his new book as part of the Brooklyn Sci-Fi Film Festival. So,
oh, that's cool. I didn't hear anything about that.
Apparently, you weren't invited.
Oh, okay.
Even though you definitely should be. When we set it up, I'll see if I can rope you into it. Although I think it might be in person. Which is why
I still would go to that.
All right. Well, we'll see. We'll see. I'll have to.
Okay, well, this took a turn.
All of a sudden, Mike is.
Okay, no, that's cool.
He's pissed.
How's the adjudication been going for that?
Oh, I'm done. Are you done?
I'm not done yet, no. But It's been fun. I got some sci-fi documentaries, which is my wheelhouse. I'm loving that. Yeah. Wow, I cannot find the name of this thing, and it's bugging me now. I'll send it to you. Anyway, it is a thing.
All right. Yeah, no, I got the same categories as last year, and I gotta say, the line of the quality went up markedly this year.
Oh, cool.
So I was like, wow, this is very impressive. I don't know how to adjudicate them because they're all good. All right, anyway, not appropriate for any of the things that we're talking about, but you want to know what is appropriate for the things we're talking about,
What's that,
Mike?
Keith?
Last week's reviews from the patrons. Ooh, we timed it perfectly that time. And of course, we are talking about Soldiers of the Empire from last week. Here is what the patron said. If you would like me to read your comment, all you have to do is become a Patreon at patreon.com/K&M, and there's all sorts of delicious bonus nonsense up for you every single week. Mike drops his watch-along of the show where he sees it for the very first time. You can see the show. You can see his face. He will talk to you. He will chat with you while it is happening.
And Keith, do you know what I've done?
What have you done?
Patreon now allows you to release episodes one-off. So if there happens to be your favorite episode, if you can't bear the idea of supporting us on a monthly basis,
I certainly would.
But there's one episode in particular you want to watch my reaction to, you can purchase just that episode. Now, I will say this.
Really?
You can get in on the Patreon for $1.
That's true. So,
and Patreon sets the limit to purchase one episode at $3. So it is an incredibly bad cost
Are you bad with money? But would you like to see
the value proposition
Mike watch Children of Time?
is 300 times what a monthly subscription would cost you. But you know what? You do you.
If you were good with money, you wouldn't be patrons of us anyway.
That's fair.
All right, well, here is what you had to say about last week's episode. Joshua Cronin says, I love this episode. As I always say, I'm not a fan of Klingon episodes, but this one is an exception. It really does solidify Martok being the best Klingon in all of Trekdom. Best? Well, there you go. Happy to see Jadzia be her badass self and makes me love her so much. And I give some props to Worf for pushing Martok out of his slump. 89 self-sealing stem bolts from me. Although, for soldiers of the Empire, should they be stem bolts or stab bolts?
I like it. I like where this is going.
I know. It would have been funny last week when it was that episode.
Keith, can I just close the gap here?
Yes, close the circle.
It is available on Amazon Prime Streaming. It originally aired on History, so you could probably find it on their VOD. It's called The Center Seat, 55 Years of Star Trek. It is an 8-episode docuseries.
Mike, it's time for you to ask the question.
Can I watch it?
No!
There's only one episode on Deep Space Nine. I won't watch that one.
No, you can't watch any of it.
Okay.
No.
I'm going to do it anyway, but I'll say yes here.
You were going to be sad. You're going to be sad.
I know. I can't risk it.
You're going to regret it. You're going to have
I know.
regrets. Don't want that. All right. So, Brian from Video Game Drive-By says, this might be my favorite Klingon episode. I just love when Burton directs Klingon fun. Plus, it's good to look at the possibility of... It is a good look at the possibility of overcoming PTSD. This episode and the later one I won't spoil helped me after I was unfortunately beaten and robbed and subsequently fired from my dream job. What?
Jeez. What?
It's not a sequence. I think should be there. Wow. All right, that's a good story. More talk about stories coming up later. The journey of Martok and an unmentioned other character.
Did all those things happen at one time, or are they commoed?
I mean, I'm assuming beaten and robbed happened at the same time.
But
and
like
fired
not
probably from the fallout of that.
Oof.
I would imagine.
That's terrible.
Terrible. Anyway, the journey of Martok and an unmentioned other character I will discuss at a later time have been invaluable. Yes, I know what the other episode you're talking about, and I think that's been really helpful for a lot of people. All right, 90 self-sealing stem bolts. As for my mention of the funny brushes with death, we have a choice. You ready for this? Pick one, and I'll happily tell you about it in a future comment. Your options are: 1, the time Batman helped me save 25 cents. I'm curious how that was a brush with death, but I like it.
Okay.
2, the time I learned the difference between a skate and a shark. Not what you'd expect. Ooh, like a hockey skate. 3, the month of gravity. I don't even know what that means. And 4, the rhino incident. Not deadly, just hilariously embarrassing. Oh,
my vote's Rhino.
Ooh. Did you run into Mitt Romney? Is it Rhino?
I have a Batman story, too. My first year in New York, I almost got run over by Batman. My cab driver almost ran over Batman.
Oh, okay. That makes a great deal more sense, because there's a lot of discount Batmans and Elmos and Transformers all over the place, in Times Square at least.
And so the cab driver screeches on his brakes, right? I'm going to a party or something. I can't remember. I was going downtown. And he goes, spoiler, this is a curse word, so hold your ears if you're sensitive. The cab driver turns to me and goes, fucking Batman. It was awesome. It was awesome. Never forget it.
Oh, I was in a cab once that got hit by a dump truck.
Dumps like a truck? Or no, an actual dump truck?
An actual dump truck, yeah. It was just a brush by, but technically we had to stop and get out, and I was like, all right, bye, have fun. Because what am I gonna do? All right, so the rhino incident, that does sound fun. The month of gravity has me peaked as well. Like,
could
what
be
does
good
that
sci-fi.
mean?
Yeah.
All right, well, you know what? Because we've had beef already, I will say, let's go with the rhino incident.
Okay.
Only seems fair. It's a peace offering to Mike for something somebody else did. All right, so next up, Kevin Miles. Kevin Miles, Hall of Famer, patron, says, I give this episode 93, Self-Sealing Stem Bolts. I love a good Klingon story. Thanks for making me a patron. I am truly honored. Well,
you did
let me tell you, Kevin, right to my left, I have 9 episodes of material semi, including a surprise that I don't know about yet, as well as the Colin Dagan box, which we have to shoot that maybe Friday, maybe tomorrow?
Tomorrow? Yeah.
Oh, so much fun. All right, Hibernation Pod says, if you think the blood looks bad on my uniform, wait until the decks are dripping with it. Good quote from the episode. My friends who I grew up with once said about me a long time ago, drinking with me was bad enough, but drinking with me and his brothers was like going to drink with Klingons. 80 self-stabbing stem bolts. Yeah, I kind of want to go drinking with the Klingons.
We never really drank together, you and I. Well, you and my wife did, but I'm not a big drinker.
You're not a big drinker, and I'm not a big drinker because I see you places I have to drive home from.
Fair, yeah.
So, yeah, and I, you know, I think, and maybe that time with Jen was like, where I was like, I don't think it's fun to like drink that much anymore. Like I'm just not somebody who like cares to become that inebriated.
It's pretty funny to be the sober guy in that occasion.
Oh, but look,
we both still got injured.
Purpose.
Drunk or not, we both got hurt.
Yeah, well, look,
old guys shouldn't boogie board is the title of that story.
It's true. It had nothing to do with the alcohol. No, it was a dark, weird time. It was in the middle of COVID. It was on the beach. It was also a box of wine. You don't really know how much you're drinking.
It's fair. All of that.
The answer between the two of us was a box.
Yeah.
But, yeah. No, that was fun. Yeah. So we don't really have opportunity to do that much. Anyway, where was I? All right. So Mysterious Anne comes in and says, I've been really enjoying the ongoing conversation about theism versus atheism and death. To keep it going, boy, talking about like going higher brow than our episode's gone so far. To keep it going, I've worked in hospitals and have been with lots of different kinds of people and families at the time of death. My experience is that people who are afraid of death, afraid when facing death, regardless of their religion or core beliefs, aren't afraid because of concerns about the afterlife, but because of not wanting to leave this life and or becoming because the physiological process of dying that they're going through is scary. Being scared at death isn't a reflection of faith or lack of faith. It's a very human response to a very human thing. Fantastic point. And I think that's absolutely true. And I imagine were I faced that, and happily I never faced that it would be like, I don't want to give this up. As much as anything else. Similarly, grief is not an indication of faith or lack of faith. Grief is less about the afterlife than the heartbreaking reality of someone being gone in this life. In my experience, believing in something bigger, better, next after death doesn't change the fact that in death, something important has changed and been lost in this life and this world. Yeah. Some wisdom. Dropping some wisdom. I got nothing to add to that. That's just good wise stuff. But also, Klingons! I give this episode 80 self-stabbing stem bolts. YouTube viewer comes in and says the late 90s and early aughts were a dark time where two production companies would simultaneously release movies with the same basic premise. Volcanoes, asteroids, talking ants, newlywed-based romantic comedies, among others. Yeah, that's right, the ants one too.
It was Ants, and then the other one was Bug's Life. Yeah, one starred Woody Allen, the other A Bug's Life.
YouTube continues. After watching Deep Space Nine multiple times, I am still on the fence whether Martok refusing to replace his eye is a good characterization or lazy writing. This is just a Deep Space Nine thing. Lots and lots of sci-fi fantasy I watch or read as a universe where it's established that healing amputees is relatively easy, but lots of characters refuse to do it anyway because the artists like to show battle-damaged heroes and villains. It's a very narrow line between evocative storytelling and lazy writing. I think the Star Trek writers did this so they could clearly differentiate real Martok from changeling Martok, which I'm on the fence about whether this is a good idea or a bad idea. The more Keith and Mike keep talking about pirate tropes, the less I like the one-eyed trope for Martok. Yeah, you know what? It's a really... I see your point, and I do think that it is both like a badass visual as part of the storytelling. It is, a good way to distinguish real Martok from fake Martok. But I also think I have not lost a limb or an eye or anything like that, so I do not have the experience of having lost something like that. But I imagine if somebody has, deciding whether or not to replace it or replace it in a way that makes it indistinguishable, whether you go with a glass eye or whether you stay with a patch or whether you sew it up, I don't know. That I imagine that is probably a deeply personal decision on how you care to deal with that. You lose, I'm sure for veterans who have lost a limb, do I replace it with a prosthetic? Do I not? Do I want a realistic prosthetic, or do I want one that is very obviously what it is? I don't know, and I imagine that's a personal choice.
My 2 cents on it is twofold. One, totally agree that when it comes to sci-fi universes and lore, really difficult to keep track of all the medical advances and when you should do it and when you shouldn't do it, and
it's whatever's convenient for the writing.
Convenience and production concerns. However, in this particular stance, I will say I'm on board because, forget how humans would deal with it, I think specifically Klingons who lost something in battle are probably much more likely to want to display, almost as a medal of honor, said thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think about it this way, like the scars that I have, and I don't have a lot of scars, I've lived a very pudgy life, right? But the ones that I have, I don't want fixed. Mm-hmm. I mean, even if I had the money to delete my scars, I wouldn't, because they're all stories, they're all experiences, and I don't have any scars from things that I'm proud of, except perhaps the little scar on my knuckle from a hockey fight, right? Because I earned it in battle like a Klingon.
He was cutting up apples for a snack.
No, I would fix the thing structurally if I could. Right, my goofy pinky, which I don't care how it looks, but the fact that it tires after X amount of time playing piano, I would get it fixed for that. But cosmetically, I wouldn't get it fixed because I kind of like the story. So I don't know. I see your point, but I think based on what you're saying I'm thinking Martok. I think Martok wants the street cred.
Yeah.
More than anything else.
Underpay.
So, where were we? So, Mike is mostly right.
Hey!
Hey, how about that? I think they telegraphed the main conflict in this episode a little too much. That said, I don't know a better way to write this off the top of my head. Given that the Klingons enter the bar wearing Carnassian neck bones, they did not appear to me as posing as drama kids. They reference the neck bones. I never actually saw the neck bones. I think the dialogue written sounds tough. They just didn't look tough to me.
It wasn't even visual for me. It was more the sense of they were a gang of jets rather than individual characters. You know what I mean? They were just like they didn't feel distinguishable to me.
Also, for me, it was like the sleeveless Klingon.
Yeah.
Ooh, look at that farmer's tan. Good Lord. I'm not farming. I'm just walking through my neighborhood, tubby waddling. But is this tough? I just don't buy it.
And when your T-shirt says "Leave women alone," absolutely tough.
Hey, look, this was a gift from my ex's ex, because that's a normal life that I have.
That's cool. I like it. It's a cool tee.
Yeah, I do too. Anyway, Mike was mostly it is not a wormhole that Worf wears his family crest on without a sash. It's Worf's way of saying Klingon society disowned my family, but I have not. Oh, I don't think it's a wormhole. I just think the line of dialogue that he says, there's no point in wearing it because my family has no honor, and then I wear it.
Mm-hmm.
That's my point. I do like wise and competent Dax more than I like cutesy quipping Dax, given that Martok was very understanding about Garrick's claustrophobia earlier. I'm guessing that Klingons do take mental health seriously. Though, like real-world contemporary humans, they might not always treat mental health issues the best way because there's still a lot about the human brain we don't understand. Yeah, good point. This is a good episode. My main misgiving about this is that it's so character-driven and that the plot seems weak sometimes. It helps that Martok is not a member of the main cast, so he doesn't have a proverbial plot armor like Dax or Worf, but it's a good it's got good character arcs and the table setting for later. 80 self-stabbing stem bolts, kapla! And lastly, JD comes in, says, I'm sorry I missed both watch-alongs this week, but I started learning 3D modeling and have gotten in the groove and learned how to do this well. So for a week now, I have been doing nothing but making stuff in Blender, and I can't stop. Oh my god, do I exquisitely understand the obsession with a new cool thing that you can now do new things with.
Especially when you've got some podcast friends who are going to ask you for all kinds of crazy things now that we know you 3D model.
It's bad. You should never have said that.
You don't have to print them. You just send me the models so I have them for when I can print them.
Yeah, well, how long T-minus... Start the clock for when Mike buys his 3D printer.
Well, that clock...
Now that he has his basement to put it in.
Yeah, but he don't have money anymore.
No, all your money's gone. That's true.
Bye-bye.
It's in South Texas.
That's
we don't
a
have
scar
basements.
I would fix, Keith. That's a scar I'd happily take the blinky light to bring that limb back.
Your credit?
Yeah.
Texas don't have basements, so they'd flood. So if I wanted an in-house pool, I could build a basement. Oh, that's a bummer.
There's no basement to the Alamo.
I love basements.
He's got a shed, though. He's got a workshop.
But he does say that when I was waiting on my studio to be built, which just got finished, I used a digital program to decide on my layout, just like us. So you realize the longer you talk, the longer my comment section is going to be. Uh-oh. That's never good news. One other thing about last week's episode, just sort of a non-spoiler, it's so bad we never got to see a Lita Moogie episode. Oh, good point. JD also hates Santa Claus. I don't hate Santa Claus. I just that was fake news.
You know what happens when you've crossed Lita and Moogie? You get a loogie.
Or a Mita.
They're both gross.
They're both gross. I mean, one of them sounds a little delicious. It's like a meat pita, a Mita.
Moving on. I'm not allowed to cut anything, so enjoy these hot jokes.
Mita.
I'll meet you outside.
You want to meet up and get some mitas?
So dumb.
JD continues, Mike, to stab is to love.
It's fair.
I think Shakespeare said that, or the Bible maybe. I will never regret butt shivs, nor should you. I made a video months ago about how the Klingons and how so many people get them wrong. And it's great seeing Mike actually clue in to how the writers actually did give Klingons more nuance than the Planet of Hats idea did for many of the other species. They are a great culture. There was so much more to them than angry, fighty bad dudes. This is a great episode and finally gives us some real Martok meat. You know you could put some Martok meat
on your Mita.
In a delicious Mita. I'll give it 80 self-stabbing stem bolts. Playmates did do a Martok figure, but only in an 8-inch super murderer version. You know what? I'm gonna say something sacrilegious. Luckily, I'm saying it on this and not on the Toys channel. But honestly, if from Playmates, if it's not the 4.75, I don't really care.
As Keith has been saying his whole life, who would want 8 inches?
Who would want more than 4.75 inches? I mean, at least it's hard. You can hammer in a nail with it. Those big ones are soft. All right. I'm sorry. Mike is like, you know what? That's staying in.
That was yours, baby. Enjoy it.
All right. Let's talk about Children of Time, shall we?
Yes.
All right. It aired on May 5th, 1997. The top song. We got a new one, buddy. You ready?
Mm-hmm.
I'm ready to hear Mike's Hypnotized by Notorious B.I.G.
Oh, that feels like a bad choice, too.
It's all, of course it is.
Yeah, okay, I'm out. Hypnotized.
Wow, that was great. DJ Mikey Mike over there.
I don't think I know that.
You would if you listened to it. The top movie.
Oh boy, eyelash.
Is appropriately Breakdown, the Kurt Russell film, which I didn't. That's not the one where he goes like platinum blonde and shoots up L.A. I think it's a different one.
No, that's Falling Down.
Falling Down. This is a slightly different version of that. All right. Well, you want to know what was slightly different back in 1997?
What's that?
It was our TV. It was a lower resolution.
Really
it was a 4:3 aspect ratio. It was far more competent than what you're watching right now. Even if you're watching us at a higher resolution on a better screen than they ever had then, we are much, much worse.
So, rather than go through the litany of shows that were on this evening, there's one that I have. I have a mission for our audience, Keith, because I did some research. I did some correct research, and I can't find it. So, on ABC at 8 p.m., there's a special, an ABC special, which we love. Sometimes you get David Copperfield, sometimes you get an animal show.
When animals attack.
This was called Explosion Live! Exclamation point. I Googled YouTube. I went all over the place. I cannot find what this was, and I need to know. I need to know what was the explosion.
Well, you want to know what the problem is? You're searching for Explosion Live, but now it's Explosion Taped.
No, but when you Google anything like ABC, special, explosion, live, it's just news coverage about random explosions that took place.
Oh, yeah.
So I can't narrow down on the... And the TV database only gives me that it was a special that aired, series. That's it. That's all the info.
Wow.
So somebody out there...
It's probably like them taking down a building or something.
You'd think, but a whole
like
hour?
They blew up a casino or something. Well,
yeah.
Look, TV was not good.
You're right.
I mean, think about like the Evel Knievel specials.
You're right.
Where like 90 minutes of warm up.
But wouldn't you call that Demolition Live?
Well, that doesn't sound as much fun.
Explosion Live!
It's probably the WWF. Like, don't want to be confused with the Tag Team Destroyers Demolition.
So if anyone out there can find a link or find any information, let us know in the comments, because I need to know what that was.
Explosion Live! All right. I'm so sorry, everybody. We should never record on a Thursday. This episode was directed by Alan Croker, who last directed The Ascent. Remember The Ascent?
Mm-hmm.
It was written by David Weddle and Bradley Thompson with a teleplay by Renee Echevarria, which means it's time to waste more of your time. Now, Keith, waste your time.
With what?
With trivial trivia. This episode aired the same day as Armin Shimmerman's first appearance on Buffy the Vampire Slayer, where he would continue as a recurring character for the next 2 seasons.
Sheesh.
Zimmerman has said that on at least 3 occasions, he worked on both shows in the same day, getting into the makeup chair at dawn to shoot his scenes for Deep Space Nine in the morning, then getting out of makeup in early afternoon and driving an hour across town to shoot scenes for Buffy late into the night.
Oh, I feel bad for him.
Ooh, that is a lot.
Do I? Or do I not feel bad for him for having 2 awesome roles on television?
on legendary series. You've watched Buffy, yeah? Yeah. It'd be another good show to do.
It would be. I haven't visited Buffy in quite a while, and I do love it.
I watched my last watch through of Buffy was probably 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah.
It's a little weird now that we know more about Joss Whedon.
Yeah.
Because like part of it was like enjoying the genius of all that. But I'm not going to blame everybody else for that.
But Keith, it would give me a lot of time to talk about some really interesting interactions I've had with Joss Whedon.
Have you had interactions with Joss Whedon?
Brief overview. So I'm sure I've mentioned it a few times. I used to work with the Equality Now, which was a women's human rights organization.
Right.
And Gloria Steinem was on the board. Legendary actress. Oh my God. She's one
Meryl
of the...
Streep.
Meryl Streep. Oh my God. Lost it there. Anyway, long story short, there was a couple of conferences we did, and they brought Joss on because he was working...
the feminist writer.
Yeah, and there are stories.
Great.
I will say though, despite many of the things that have come out, my personal interactions with him, he was very, very nice. However, I will say, my approach to working in that organization was, despite my outward appearances to most, was to keep my mouth shut 99% of the time. Do a lot of listening and hardworking and supporting. Joss took a different avenue. Very outspoken.
Should not come as a surprise.
Yeah.
Okay, well, there's our Joss Whedon moment.
Yeah.
Look, once we're done Star Trek in 2060, we can. There
was a lunch, Keith. I did it. It was on. We were right over by Carnegie Hall. Was the office.
Mm-hmm.
And
that's near where my old office was.
Yeah, there was a lunch that I brought, or I picked up. It was me, Yasmin, a bunch of people from the office, Joss, Gloria, and Meryl Streep in a little office chatting.
Just the four of you having lunch?
No. There's some other, really awesome feminist lawyers and all kinds of awesome people that I worked with. But it was a weird time, crazy time.
Yeah. It's always weird when you have that like.
But because of the stuff we were working on, it was heavy, right? It was the two initiatives I worked on most when I was there. Supported. I was working support stuff, but was the getting Saudi Arabian women their license, the ability to drive, which was a big push, and anti-female genital mutilation, which is, it's not a lot of levity when you're having those kind of conversations. So
yeah, it's tremendously important work. Not a barrel of laughs.
Still being done. Check it out, equalitynow.org, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, well, there you go. All right. So the planting scenes, back to Children of Time. I think the people listening to this are now adults of time. They're going to be geriatrics of time.
We don't need to go back 200 years. How about 20 minutes? And we could just have started the episode then.
No, we're going to sit in this. The planting scenes were filmed at Amundsen Ranch near Ventura, California. But on the day of the shoot, there were gale force winds, and equipment trucks had to be used as wind blocks. And it was so cold that the crew were all wearing snow jackets, but the actors had to wear shirt sleeves because it was supposed to be a beautiful day. Between takes, the actors had to be sprayed down to make it look like they were sweating.
All right, would you rather, Keith, you're working as an extra, or no? Let's bump you up. You're a guest star on a show.
I'm an under 5 at least.
You can choose to be in heavy costuming, but it's pretending it's wintertime, but you're shooting on location and it's hot as hell.
Oh,
or
100% have it be cold and pretend I'm hot.
Okay.
1,000,000 times over.
I probably agree. Yeah.
Like Jillian just had to shoot a summer for winter thing this summer.
It's often those Christmas movies because they shoot all those Christmas movies now, like in the spring and summer.
Oh, it's craziness. Ugh. No, thank you. I much prefer to be cold than hot. You heard it here first. Here.
I agree. You can always put on a sweater.
You can always put, at least between takes.
Mm-hmm.
A Klingon descendant mentions slaying a Yar bear in the previous year. Viewers are to assume that Worf, who held Tasha Yar's fighting skills in high regard, as established in her last appearance on the Next Gen, named the large predator on the new planet after his former crewmate. I think that's a fantastic little Easter egg.
Cool. Tasha Yar dies, right?
No spoilers!
No, you spoiled it during the toys.
Yeah, no. Well, she didn't make it out of season 1.
Yeah.
But there's a great Easter egg in her last appearance. All right, anyway, the stasis chamber into which Dr. Bashir places the present-day Odo in his liquid state for safekeeping, of course. It's just a simple 20th century bread maker, redressed with LEDs and other props attached to it. Yeah, did your parents have a bread maker at that point?
Oh, everybody's had a bread maker.
Yeah. My father got really into making bread in the bread maker, and then he went on to make real bread, and now he doesn't do any of it.
Keith, now it's time for Mike's.
Oh God! Explosions! Live!
I thought 1000% thought that was the reverb button. I was gonna say fact
Every
that no
time
one
you
cares
hit that,
about.
I'm going to assume that you had to toot. You're just covering it with that.
So this is like
air horn
a
of a different
weird,
color.
weird thing. But now we're off the rails, so here we are.
Yeah,
I remember bread making. My brother was the first to get a bread maker, right?
that sounds right.
And we made so much bread. He was so into it. And I'll never forget because it was in his first house he ever bought, which was a townhouse.
Right.
Which, interestingly, crazy world.
Sharing a wall.
I just bought my first home that is next door to the first house my brother ever bought.
You share a wall with your brother's ex-house.
It's weird. But, hey.
Crazy.
Synchronicity. It's almost like I can
as
smell the
someone
bread.
might say.
I can smell the bread from 25 years ago through the wall.
Mmm.
It's moldy.
Is that the story?
That's the story.
That's the air horn story?
It didn't mean to air horn it. It didn't earn the air horn.
Wait, so the story was so that was the long journey just to brag about your new house?
I wasn't. No, you said bread, and I thought, well, I have a bread story.
Wait, bring it. Just give me a topic.
Trapper keepers.
Wah, 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 wah. You know, I never had a trapper keeper. And you know who else I didn't imagine having a trapper keeper? J.J. Abrams, who I met once.
Oh, Keith, but I've already took that entire portion of the episode out because I
Nope.
shouldn't have mentioned it.
No, it's in. There's no
I think it's
editing.
best that it's not in, actually.
You know, what are you talking about?
I don't know that I can say those people's names.
Sure, you could say their names.
I don't know.
We say the people's names every day.
Well, I can say the celebrity's name. I didn't say anybody I worked with's name, did I?
No.
Okay, it's in.
You never worked with any of those people. You did, and you didn't say anything bad about any of them. You just said that they existed.
They do great work.
Working hard for an important cause.
You're right.
Those are all good things.
Super. Yeah, and
Those are
they're just.
positive
And
things.
I'm glad we mentioned them on the same episode where you talked about 4.5-inch action figures.
Yeah. Well, you want to know who else may have baked bread or didn't bake bread?
These fine folks. We've got the yeasty Brian Kimball Beersock, toasted Peter Bank, cinnamon swirl Frank Rinch. I'm gonna run out.
Nope. You're stuck. You got to do it now.
Quark's Bar on the Rise, Yanba. I got it. I'm done. Ryan Chesley.
No,
Joshua
wait. Yon Bun.
We're just losing all of these patrons as I speak. Ryan Chesley. Joshua
Come back
Cronin.
next week. It's just a cold, vacant space.
Merritt Neath. Andrew Hayes. Alan. And the mysterious Worf's Big Old Boot Shifts, Charles Babbage, Harry Pothead, Anton Thies, Carl Fisher, Syrian Productions, Nikolay Ivanovich, Lobachevsky, Delusions at Noon, YouTube viewer, James Hubbard, Hibernation Pod, Miri Holcomb, Brian from Video Game Drive-By, Odo's Bucket, Lost Emu, Scott B, JD Mays, Colin Dagan, Chris Mitchell, Frank Wrench, Pat, Joshua, Kevin Miles, thank you for sending us the stuff in the mail, Kim Goss, Bolian for Soup, Lutz, Kremer, White Eldridge, Andreas Erickson. No amount is too small. We thank each and every one of these people, but don't forget, they're not the only ones. Some of these few have risen to the very top, the Patreon Hall of Fame. Where we do when you get to the Hall of Fame, all kinds of crazy stuff. We do. We eat our pets. All right, we have barbecue, pet barbecues, all kinds of crazy stuff happening.
Is that the bonus they get?
Listen, I heard a rumor. I heard it on TV.
If you go into your living room and Mike is chewing on your chihuahua, congratulations, you're a Hall of Famer. Wow. Well,
I'd like to personally apologize.
You should.
For how bad this is going.
If you would like to support the two most gluten-filled hosts on the internet.
So much gluten.
Patreon.com.
If you're a gluten for punishment, you can join the team. Okay, we're serious now. This is important.
All right. Oh God. Our guest stars. I'm going to PBS this or NPR. Our guest stars this week include Gary Frank as Yedrin Dex, Jennifer S. Parsons as Miranda O'Brien, Davida Williams as Lisa, and Doran Fine as Molly.
You know, when you do that, Keith, it sounds Terry Gross. I get it.
It's high praise. Terry Gross is a national treasure.
It's true.
Thank you very much. All right. Shall we mercifully go into the screening room and everybody who just skipped this in the chapters?
How dare you?
Pat yourself on the back.
You win.
You just won life.
That was 45 minutes, man.
That sounds about right. We recorded a day late, so we didn't have toys, so we hadn't had a chance to talk to each other.
Yeah, that's fair.
For a week, so we had some talks to get through. All right, so in our teaser, we are on the Defiant, heading home from the Gamma Quadrant. Everybody is tired, and Odo, Dax, and Kira chat over coffee, or Rock the Geno, of course. And we find out in this conversation that Kira and Shakar have broken up from terminal blandness. Yeah, there it is. Much like that bread maker bread, it's just white and bland. So Odo definitely has feelings about this, and he immediately pieces out. Kira, oblivious to how big this news is for him. All right, here you called wormhole already.
From the beginning. Now, I know how you can justify it, but I'm just going to say it. The fact that Kira is oblivious to Odo's bigger feelings is just so disingenuous to me. Maybe she's chosen to not want to hear or see it, but she hears or sees it.
Okay, all right. Let's get into this. First off, if women who I were crushing on were not oblivious to that crush, my heart would be broken. So I'm assuming they just don't know. That's what protects my heart. But also, I think there's some willful denial in these situations, and I don't think that it being denial makes it a wormhole. I think it might just make it convenient blinders. But also, on Odo's part, he has hidden it.
He's done some of the worst obfuscation I've ever seen. This is a great example.
Yeah, but most of it has happened on our screens, but not Kira's.
That's fair. That's fair.
We've seen him like melt down literally and metaphorically multiple times, but Kira was never there for that.
I will say, and I'll say it up front because there's much bigger things to talk about in this episode. It has bothered me. Her willful, unwillful ignorance has bothered me since the beginning of this whole arc. I feel that this episode rectifies or retcons, however you want to look at it, that...
Retcondifies?
Yeah, retcondifies it very satisfyingly for me. So now at least we end up both in a place of knowledge and we can choose how we proceed from here, rather than like both. I didn't like the dynamic, and it feels much more real and interesting to me now, so kudos.
Yeah, I mean, it is weird that she doesn't pick up on it, or hasn't until this point. But I also think that, like, you know how there's people come into your life in such different contexts that you just don't quite see it sometimes. Like, you know, if you meet somebody and you think that they're gay, and you have this whole relationship with them, not really clocking, oh wait, no, they actually you put him in a different box, right? And he's like a goo alien. Maybe she didn't put him in the romantic box for a long time. And so, like, I could see it happening.
I'll give you I will, to against myself. I remember one time I had a group of friends who I friend zoned right away, all of them, because when you're a straight guy in the theater, you sort of have to be very explicit about not when you don't have interest versus when you do have an interest, because you don't want to be the creepy guy, which is very easy to become.
Sure.
And so these people became my tribe very soon, blah, 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 blah. Years later, I found out one of those people was like crushing on me, and I was absolutely oblivious to it because I had predetermined I was going to friend zone. So I guess it'd be different if I had like footage of them behaving with other people. It probably would have given me more context. But you're right. I guess since a lot of that happened off screen, I'm removing the wormhole. I'm removing it. We should move forward on the 7th slide.
I wonder how many people have friend zoned me without knowing it. Like, I can think of 1,000 different people who have friend zoned me, but I wonder how many of them knew that I was crushing versus how many of them did not. I don't know. Because I have about as much game as Zodo does. So.
Well, which Zodo?
Well, I mean, give me another 200 years and a Stairmaster, maybe I got a chance.
And cut a deeper V.
Cut a deeper V. I think that's my problem. All right. Anyway, later on the bridge, Dax discovers an energy barrier around a planet, and there might be life on it. She wants to investigate, but everybody else is like, "Can we just go home now?" Because they're at the end of a long mission in the Gamma Quadrant, no less. But Dax says, the interference is growing, this is our last chance, and, of course, they're gonna do it. So she makes some shield modifications, and they go through the barrier. And, inevitably, something does go wrong, and there's a bunch of zappy lighting, and Kira gets hit. But don't worry, she gives Chekhov's "I'm fine." You know what that means? She's not fine. It's not fine. O'Brien then says the ship has been damaged and it's going to take a few days to repair. Then they get a call from the surface, and we find out there are 8,000 people on that planet, and specifically 8,000 humans on that planet. And they call, and they already know everybody's name. They have been expecting them. Interesting. We arrive on the matte painting that has moving windmills in the matte painting, which I thought was a great detail, despite the fact that they were causing cancer and killing whales. So they beam down to discover a bunch of human villagers. The leaders come up to O'Brien. The two leaders are named O'Brien and Dax. Well, that's interesting. And Miranda O'Brien says this settlement was founded by the crew of a Starfleet vessel that crashed on this planet 2 centuries ago. I realize this is going to be hard for you to accept, but that ship was the Defiant. 2 days from now, when you leave here and try to pass through the energy barrier, you'll be thrown back in time 200 years. And you'll be stranded here and become the founders of this settlement. We are your descendants.
So basically, they they figured out somehow how far back in time they went.
Well,
right?
they knew because they lived the 200 years. They just counted the 200 years.
Until they came back.
No, what they... All right, so our heroes in this world weren't able to get out. They crash land on the planet. They then... Yes, I guess they figure out what time it is. They figure we have gone back 200 years. Then they figure out what the... I think with their like clocks and stuff on the Defiant and their whatever are able to... Oh my God, it's 200 years ago.
Because they would have had they were so casual as to when they found us. They must have known this is the day we should intercept.
Well, yeah, because they as soon as they figured out what time they were now, they knew when they crashed.
It's like when everybody gets so excited when you seal a time capsule, and I'm always like, this is the suckiest part. The fun part's like 200 years from now when my grandkids get to open it. Right now, what are we having a party for?
Yeah, but they know when they're going to show up.
Yeah,
you know, it's like Back to the Future. They know it was 1985 or whatever it was when it happened. But what a cool concept.
Cool concept, though. Riddle me this. It's okay. Technobabble as to how the time travel took place, right? It's like we went through a thing that's a thing that's
the gravimetric interference, blah blah blah. Who cares?
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Yeah. It's blah blah blah. Who cares? Is how it happened. So in Act 1, Yedrin Dax, this dude here, proves, that the Dax symbiont is indeed in him. So there are now 2 Dax symbionts existing at the same time.
Double Dax.
And the Miranda is a descendant of O'Brien, and O'Brien's assistant in engineering. Miles gives a very solid uh-oh face to hearing this, to which Cisco replies with a pretty remarkable and subtle "you dirty dog" face. Yedrin then proves himself to Cisco by reminding him of a time that they were both out chasing exotic dancers. And Cisco quickly says, "That'll do, pig." Meanwhile, a little boy goes up to Worf. Apparently Worf is a legend. And the boy says, "Is it true that you can kill somebody just by looking at them?" And Worf, excellent, "Only when I am angry." Great line.
You wouldn't like
Great
me when I'm
line.
angry.
Good Worfing. They go into the school and see that Dax made an AI teacher version of Quark, which I'm sure Quark will be charging them for the licensing fees and appearance rights. But Armin doesn't care because he's too busy shooting Buffy. So the kids discuss their shared genetics, and O'Brien is weirded out that one of the girls is named Molly. They discuss how they set up the settlement with the remains of the Defiant. And they of course point out there's no way to ask for help because they were 200 years in the past and there's no Federation to ask. Also, they're in the Gamma Quadrant. So they couldn't have done anything anyway. But then they discover that there were only 48 original settlers, not the 49 of the complement of the Defiant at that point, and we find out that Kira died soon after they landed because of Chekhov's bridge zap. So Cisco begins the temporal morality questions that are our show. If they use their knowledge to get out safely, then they will prevent themselves from ever settling on the planet 200 years ago and delete 8,000 people. So, thus we get to the thing we're going to wrestle with this whole episode.
So I have kind of a question as to the stakes. I'm going to put it in territory because I don't think they clearly explained it for me to be satisfied.
Okay, well, don't worry. JD sent a pre-buttal, so knowing you're gonna have wormholes, so we're gonna get into all the wormholes. So let's go.
Okay, well, my question, I guess, question hole is okay. Options 1, we use our current knowledge and get out of there, and then they all blip out. All right. 2, we redo. I guess it's part 2 that I'm confused about. If we recreate their steps such that we Groundhog Day it,
right?
Don't we also blip them out and just return to the start and create a loop where we never get past this point? So aren't we theoretically blipping out their future anyway?
Well, I guess we are starting a loop.
We just aren't aware of what would be the next.
We don't know what happens next.
So their theory then at least is that we would go back and start at the beginning of the loop, and they would continue it forward. They would have the option. They would have the ability to continue it forward.
Right. So I think that this would then happen again, inevitably. And when it happens again, this new generation would have the knowledge of having talked them into it once already,
and would have to do it again. So they would every 200 years. It's like Brigadoon. We have to convince them every 200 years to continue the loop.
Everybody in their timeline would have to do it once. Once they got through, it's only because once they've made the decision and they. After the 201 years, you continue on normally, but that first 200 years has to loop to maintain the integrity of it moving forward. That's they never talked about that. It's a really interesting question.
Yeah, that's where my brain started to get a little tizzy, and I realized they're not. It's not. They're either fixing it or they're blipping them. So.
Yeah, well, but they're fixing it in a way that it's gonna have to stay fixed. So every time you hit that date, you're going to have to convince them to stay again. Which seems pretty interesting because of the knowledge that you did it before, right? It's going to change the outcome. So all we're ensuring now is we get one shot at it.
Right.
The second time, because of their knowledge, it will be different inherently. So we don't even know if it would have solved it permanently other than just giving them one more spin.
Right, because there's no guarantee that they would make the same choices architecturally, agriculturally, because there'd be ripples, right? There'd be subtle changes because now they've had this interaction, which they didn't have the first time.
And they're here by choice, which means that they probably would have prepped, so they wouldn't have crash landed. So they probably would have prepped differently. I mean, I imagine they would have handled a lot of things, and they would have known right away that they were stuck.
And as
opposed to fight against it for a long time.
They'd also have 200 years to try to devise a way out, so that the next time they have this interaction, they'd be like, okay, here's our new plan. Which they goad us with because we figured that's what this guy has been doing for 200 years, is figuring this out.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. But now that they have that knowledge, they maybe have a better chance. So, I mean, how many times will happen before they're able to break the loop? How many times before they even are able to do it in a way that solves it so they do split, or do it in a way that they split without the other side even knowing about it, so you don't even have a conversation, which then gets us back to the first version of it, which means we're back here again. Ooh, I love it.
Well, does JD's pre-buttle cover that?
No, these are all new things. That's awesome.
You can't pre-buttle me, baby.
Mike's brain does not work the way you think it does.
No, I have been known to be post-buttled, but
look, you can buttle whatever you want, buddy.
As long as there's consent.
Up to you and Jen.
Yep.
All right. So, my God, where were we? We find out Kira's gonna die. But Yedrin has a plan. He's going to try to duplicate everybody, so that when the Defiant passes through the barrier, one will go through and one will stay and form the settlement. Of course, in this case, they'd be doing it all with the foreknowledge of what's going to happen, thus changing things, which is what you just said. But it's the only chance they have. Meanwhile, in the infirmary, Bashir brags about how many little Bashir descendants there are on the planet. Nice horny Bashir's back. We also learned that because of the interference, Odo can't hold his shape. So they stuff him into a bread maker for safekeeping. Bashir is confident he can save Kira, but not if they're here. Which is another thing. Right? So, Dax and Bashir, having an entire lifetime, and whatever technology they were able to get from the Defiant, couldn't come up with a way to save Kira?
Right.
I mean, like, obviously, like, I think that's a wormhole for me. Like, plot-wise, I know it needs to happen this way for it to play out the way it plays out. But, like, you think you have an entire rest of your life to figure out how to save Kira and duplicate them.
I mean, they make their best effort by saying they can't even help her here on the Defiant. They can't do it until they get back to the station.
Right. But that's only a matter of technology.
Right. Remember when we were on that planet with the Jem'Hadar, and it took Bashir like 2 weeks to develop a whole anti-serum?
Well, and in the episode, was it the Phage? Where he like cures an entire planet in a couple of months.
Yeah. So yeah, sorry, Kira.
And he's a super genius.
The least they could have done is like make her sick, right? Like make her show any effects of this disease.
That part didn't bother me. Because but yeah, that's a wormhole for me. Anyway, it's necessary for the plot. Blah blah blah. I get it. So anyway, so Bashir goes down to the surface to figure out who he banged and how many times, and in walks Odo, and he looks distinctly more human, all the way down to his belly button. And this is 200 years older Odo, and he is indeed quite different. He confidently and easily walks up to Kira, touches her face, and says, "I'm in love with you, and I always have been." So yeah, speaking of like plot loops that have now been pushed forward,
Zaddy Odo has arrived.
Zaddy Odo. I mean, I think he's had 200 years.
Oh, yeah.
Like, what is the most fuckable version of me, and what should I be wearing?
Oh, yeah. Zaddy Odo. Well, let's call him Zodo.
Zodo!
It's a cool custom, too, because his face, it's very much like Renee's like, all right. I love Zodo.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Zodo's exactly what you wish you were in high school, right? Just like confident, saying the things that need to be said. No beating around the bush. I love Zodo.
Yeah, is able to have some facial work done. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Zodo can hold his form. You know what I'm
saying? Yeah, but Kira's been dead, so he's been holding it for 200 years. It's going to be very disappointing.
So, jokes aside, not only I think that I like the design change, all the stuff, but as this goes through, never lose sight of how subtle and amazing Renee is here.
Yeah.
Because to perform the same character, you know what it is, really? I can't believe I'm about to say this. It's Urkel. It's Stefan Urkel.
It totally is.
You know,
that's so stupid, but it's so true.
It's exactly what it is. And it's you have to play it different, but it's the same. You have to keep enough. I love Zodo, because not only is he looking out for, we'll talk about the specifics, but he's also looking out for other Odo, right?
Yeah,
himself.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's the eternal question. If you could go back in time and talk to yourself, what would you do? What would you say?
I'd make them be goo while I just did it myself. He didn't have to go back and talk to himself. He's like, listen, you stay goo, I'll handle this.
Yeah, well, anyway, yeah, but I as like the sci-fi nerd love the concept of Zodo. Yeah. And I love the the 200 years of wisdom and confidence, but also the physical change. Mm-hmm. And him getting better at mimicking human features.
All of it's great. In fact, what I love they do, yes, it's tropey, right? It's very technobabble plot convenience of, oh, well, he can't hold his shape in this atmosphere, so we don't have to appear on screen at the same time, but I can, because I learned. As convenient as that is, I like it better than having them play scenes opposite each other, which is what the lesser show would do.
Yeah,
to show the juxtaposition. I think you see enough of it here that I enjoy it.
Yeah, no, it's very clear, and I think you needed to get rid of our timeline Odo for two reasons. One, so you can sort of tell this story, right? But also, it takes agency out of our Odo, right? So that the shock and surprise of this getting revealed out of his control, I think is an extra thing about Odo being thrown into the pool, right? Mm-hmm. Because he can't walk in. That for somebody so obsessed with control, and like this, if there's anything in the world he wants to control more than anything else, it's hiding his feelings and have all of this thrown out on his behalf.
A super shout out to Nana here too, because where generally they put her up against like a super attractive guy or a handsome man, and or even those episodes with Dax where she goes to a planet and she's taken aback by this charming prince or whatever. Here, it's a character we know. It's not like they made him super hot or anything like that, and she still is able to portray sort of a somewhat being swept off her feet vibe with I don't know, it's everything that happened between them is so subtle and lovely, and you sense the shifts, and none of it feels unnatural. I really think it's cool.
Yeah, well, and I think that there's also the age thing, which has always been weird, because we're in sci-fi, right? Mm-hmm. So like Odo chronologically is probably younger than Kira, or at least relatively contemporary, but the ages of the actors they're 17 years apart.
Oh, interesting.
So Nana was 40 at this point, and Renee was almost 60 at this point. He's 57. But I think what they've done here with Zodo and glamming him up is equalize that a little bit, and I think it's interesting. Anyway, so yes, he tells Zaddy tells Kira he's in love with him, and in Act 3, Kira is flabbergasted. This is your wormhole. She never knew, and I think they address it, and he admits that he did everything he could to hide it, and I buy it more than you do. She realizes right away, to her credit, how hard the friend zone must have been for him. And he says, "Nerys, I didn't come here expecting you to throw yourself in my arms. But you're leaving here in 2 days, and I'm never going to see you again. All I'm asking is that you spend some time with me. Gaia is very beautiful. I'd love to show it to you." Fair? And she agrees. So meanwhile, hold on. Cisco is meeting with some of his descendants and the cutest baby ever. So cute, like Avery with the baby is really cute. Mm-hmm. And the Daxes call and say that their plan to duplicate is going to work. Meanwhile, Bashir is being obnoxious, no surprise. Then the Klingons arrive. So a separate Klingon group of Worf's descendants and people who like that, he's kind of started his own cult here, have broken off to live their own religion of sorts. They do not farm, they hunt, and they live off the land. Bashir, of course, points out that looks like I'm not the only legend here. The Daxes, meanwhile, discuss their relationship with Worf. And other older Dax says, "Yeah, we got married and we were happy together." And that was one of Dax's questions, which is really interesting. So Bashir keeps bragging to O'Brien about all the ladies he banged on the planet. And he wants to gossip with O'Brien and who O'Brien ended up with, but Miles is having none of it. he has a wife and child and children back at home. Which I imagine, like, it's not like Bashir's thinking about it as a single person. Oh, who am I going to get to bang?
Mm-hmm.
O'Brien, I think for him this is the hardest. He's got a wife and 2 small children. He's not looking to like bang the new lady who works for him.
Mm-hmm.
And I like that character. I like his reluctance here, which of course makes his sacrifice at the end all the more meaningful.
Yeah, I agree.
So here, I think it's interesting. There's a cutscene in the medical bay where Kira is talking to Odo in the bread box, which it's very interesting. Here's what she says. Maybe you're thinking I should have known, should have guessed, but I didn't have any idea. You realize that, don't you? I know you can't answer me. I'm not even sure if you can hear me. But if you can, I just want to say that I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner. I'm sorry if I hurt you in any way I didn't mean to. You're probably wondering what's going to happen next. So am I. The only thing I know for sure is that I don't want anything to get in the way of our friendship. But do me a favor. If there's anything else you're keeping from me, any other deep dark secret, you should just I should know about it. Any other dark secret I should know about, but don't. Just tell me, okay? I see why they cut it, because we kind of have this beat later. But her speaking to him at his, not a deathbed, it's his goo bed. Interesting. This is the first time we see Kira's point of view on this, really.
I kind of love the scene at the end, though.
I do too.
I think it's neutered if this scene's in.
Agreed. So I think it's a good cut. Mm-hmm. So then Planet Odo and Kira pray over Planet Kira's grave in a gorgeous real-life location. That area of California is stunning. And the whole situation is interestingly causing a bit of a spiritual crisis for Kira. And she says, I've always believed there's only one destiny, one path. And now we're going to use technology to get around that. I'm not sure how it makes me feel. And Odo says, I know exactly how it makes me feel. You don't know how much it means to me to know you're going home, Nerys. It won't change things for me. I lost you 200 years ago, but for the other Odo up on the ship, it changes everything. He doesn't have to lose you, and somehow knowing that makes me feel better. Does that make any sense? And Kira says, you've changed so much, Odo. I don't just mean the way you look. You used to be so closed off. And he says, I have changed. And the Odo you know will change too, if you're patient with him.
Well, her mortal coils only allow so much patience.
That's true.
Like, if I gotta wait 200 years to get this hunko meat, that could be hunko goo meat, then I might not be able to wait. Out. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's...
And he's been able to season under a very specific circumstance that other Odo will not.
That's right. That even in 200 years, Odo is not going to be the same as this guy.
And truth, like, I had thought about this too, is Zodo. Zodo seasoned in the loss of, in the grief of losing her. Mm. Whereas you could argue, I'm not saying this is what's happening, but there are signs that our Odo might be less seasoning and more simmering in a bitterness. So the flavor might be a little less sweet and a little more sour, you know? I mean, all those potentialities exist.
Sure. Because if Odo is feeling constant rejection, whereas Zodo doesn't feel rejection because she can't reject him, so he's able to fill in whatever he wants.
Yeah, and
he can imagine that all of these other scenarios that might have happened.
And his feelings were finite, right? Once she died, he was able to, those 200 years were spent assessing how he felt, a very finalized feeling. Whereas Odo's feelings and relationship with Kira is still expanding and still
Well,
developing, so it's hard to really conceptualize in the moment.
Okay, so this is where it gets really interesting, though, because it is finite because she's dead, but also not because he knows she's coming back.
Right.
So he knows that my Kira's dead, but there's another Kira coming that's going to get me right back to this moment. It's and the other element of it, and this is we're doing stem bolts as we go through here. The other element here that is different for Odo or Zodo or all the other does, right? Essentially, immortality, right? Kira and everybody else have a specified lifespan.
Mm-hmm.
Odo, we don't know. But we do know at the very least 200 years later, he is fine and dandy.
Right.
And so while there are these pressing things on Odo emotionally, he's got time. He's got all the time in the world, which is also, and I think for me, one of the things that keeps growth happening for me emotionally, maturity wise, is the idea that time is finite, that I'm running out of it. So I gotta go. Odo, is time finite? I don't know. Anyway, whatever's happening, the two of them walk back holding hands, which is very interesting. So back in the settlement, Cisco is playing baseball with some kids. Of course, baseball traveled through. Dax comes up and says,
Avery Brooks' take, his clearly improv here. When she calls him away with something very important, and he does that last behind the back throw with the ball, which is clearly an improv, and it is, it defines a part of Cisco that you have to be the actor to know. I don't know, I loved it so much.
Well, it's clear Cisco loves kids.
Kids, baseball, it's just perfect. Oh,
and
so
it's
good.
clear Avery loves kids.
Mm-hmm.
And has a very specific, very kind, fatherly, and that's like his relationship with Sirach, right? It was very important to him to have that relationship. And clearly, singing with a baby, singing with the kids, this dude loves hanging out with kids. Great color for Cisco, too. And it's the antidote
Do you have the
to
script?
badass Cisco.
Do you have the script to this?
I can.
I'm just curious if that's in the stage directions, or if I gotta believe that he did that. That last behind the back toss.
Well, let's find out. So we are in Act 3. There's dude, Cisco, Kira. I'm not expecting. She has your eyes. Unzo, happy together. Rita Tenenbaum. Yes. Okay, here we are. So here's what it says. Cisco is outside the meeting hall batting a baseball to Gabriel and some other kids. Cisco says, "Nice catch." Dax approaches him carrying a pad. She doesn't look too happy. That's it.
Okay. Yeah.
So that was an Avery thing, or the director thing, but it seems very much like an Avery thing. So, anyway, they have a problem. Yedrin faked the logs. The plan to duplicate them was fake. It's just going to guarantee that they get trapped on the planet, stranding them and killing Kira. Very interesting moral swing here from Yedrin. So together they confront him. And they
I do love, because part of me would be like, Dax should have recognized that right away, but it doesn't wormhole, because if there's any person you can trust and not have to check their work,
and any person who knows how to fool you.
Yeah, is you.
I mean, I delude myself every damn day.
Yeah.
So together they confront Yedrin, and they argue about what the right thing to do is. What is Cisco's duty here? And it's not black and white. It's complex. Yedrin confesses that he feels responsible for what happened here and stranding everybody. And he knows that Jadzia does too. If she hadn't convinced them to investigate the planet, none of this would have happened. and she would have seen, she should have seen what was going to happen. He feels guilty and responsible to the community. These people have worked for generations to make a life for themselves here, and they deserve a chance to hang on to it. To which Cisco responds, I'm not denying that. I wish there was a way we could help you, but my people have a right to go home to their families, and I can't ask Kira to sacrifice her life. Not for 8,000 people, not for 8 million. No one has the right to ask that. I'm sorry, old man, there's nothing I can do. Which is an interesting monologue, but there's many times where he does ask her and other people to sacrifice their lives for the greater good all the time. We're in war. Happens constantly. But this not being a wartime thing, I don't know.
It's also weird too, because that's one of the things about time travel, right? It's especially when you're like, well, we're now we live in a world where the multiverse is in every property, right? But earlier when you start to think about the multiverse, especially when you're only thinking about one branch, you think, oh, well, that's not real, right? Our prime timeline is where it matters. These people are less. So this is interesting to me because it does force you to face, because these guys are temporal anomalies, does that make them less important, these 8,000, when you compare it to the family? I just love the way it sets it up, because it's it's basically just the train track experiment, but
yeah, sure.
But you get put in everybody. You might be an O'Brien. You've got a family and people you care about. You might be a Bashir, depending on. There's multiple viewpoints, and they express them all pretty well. The other thing I want to add about this scene before I forget is I think one of the better red herrings, foreshadowed red herrings that I've seen them do plot-wise. This scene fooled me in the end to believing that the saboteur, if you will, or the person who sent them on their way, was this guy. Because I'm like, oh, ultimately, because they hit the Dax feels bad because this is her fault. Right. This is her fault, and that guilt, eventually, he could release that guilt by...
Or if it were like our Dax did it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that it was somebody who needed to make right the wrong they had done by being too eager in the beginning.
Right.
And the fact that it flips it on us, this scene is what set that up for me. I thought it was just excellent. There's so many things, so many needles that are thread in this episode that do work.
Oh, and it's so complicated. And you really start doing the temporal mechanics. I'm like, okay, so if they know this is happening, could they get a beacon out before they get there? But if they do, then they don't show up in the first place. God. Here we go.
There's and look, let's just have the conversations as we go, like you said. I do not think there is anything wrong with O'Brien thinking, look, every day, Keith, there are thousands of people dying in different places across the world, and like you have to choose to live in a certain way, whereas you can't shoulder all of that all the time. I can't.
Yeah.
If you just sit here thinking about like, oh, I'm not doing anything to help people in Ukraine right now, or in Palestine, wherever, pick your poison. I should be doing more. I'm not, and if you saddle yourself with that all the time, you're going to be immobilized. For him to think, I want to be there for Molly's life, just like Ben thought about in that episode where he wants to be in Jake's life. That's totally okay to think that. Yes, these people will die, but my priority is to my kids.
Well, it's the put the oxygen mask on yourself first.
Yeah. Molly needs me.
Well, and the answer is there is no easy answer.
There's no answer. Yeah.
There is no answer. And it's this is what I love about this episode. I love this episode for that reason.
Yeah, and so many fairy tales, right? Well, I will die to let you live. Like, that's romantic, right? But I will argue later that you could very well say what Odo does is incredibly selfish at the end of this episode.
I think it is.
So, you can look at it through the romantic novel that he's given.
Well, and again, like, you have the action versus the motivation. Mm-hmm. Like, what he did, I think there was a good reason to do. The reason that he chose to do it, not great. So,
We'll get
Anyway,
there.
let's keep going. So Worf talks to the Klingons, and one of them tells the story of killing the Yar bear with Worf's mek'leth. That's the Tasha Yar reference. And they're distraught that they can't die a warrior's death because they know they're going to blink out of existence when they leave. So they ask Worf to kill them. Oh, wait. So I jumped ahead. So Kira and Worf watch some children playing. They discuss the fact that all of those children are about to not exist, partly to save Kira. And she, of course, is very conflicted about this. The adult settlers know what's going to happen, and they are accepting it calmly. And Brota says, tomorrow we will see the sunrise again, but no one will be here to see it set. Woof. So the Klingons come in, we can't die a warrior's death, and they ask Worf to kill them. And Rota says, I have no enemies to fight, no glory to be won. Give me an honorable death. Don't make us wait to the end like farm animals waiting for slaughter. And in Klingon culture, I kind of get it. So Worf agrees to do it, but tomorrow. Meanwhile, Kira and Odo return to her grave. She's made a decision. I can't let them do that. Not if it's going to cost 8,000 lives. We have to let history take its course, even if it means I have to die here.
I love her wording there, too, and the scene we're about to get to, too, because once again, Keith, everybody here, almost everybody, is unilaterally making the decision, right?
Right.
In reality, once again, like it's talking about selfishness, you might think you're being selfless, but to believe you alone get to make that decision is interesting. Well, she's the one who has to die. Yes, that is a sacrifice, but that doesn't mean you get to be the one who makes the call.
Well, and it tees up what I really like at the later, and that's like, no, what? It's coming up right now.
Yeah,
I'll just get to
scene.
it.
Yeah.
So they all argue with Kira back on the ship. O'Brien says, I have to go back to my family. But Dax and Worf agree that they have to save 8,000 settlers. And O'Brien says to Worf, it's easy for you to say you hardly see your son. Ouch. Not untrue, but ouch. And Sisko sits listening to everyone. But he's made his decision. Because there's only one person here who is deciding what's going to happen. I'm the decider. I'm Sisko. But I think it's really interesting to see, like you said, everyone else is trying to do all this math and make sacrifice, whatever, but we're in a military command structure. Sisko's call and only Sisko's call. Mm-hmm. And I think his strength in being willing to listen to everybody, but also at least to his subordinates, being very clear about this is the decision. I'm not guessing it. I'm not doubting it. This is the decision.
Now, unfortunately for him, though, there's plenty of precedent of people going off half-cocked, people saying one thing and doing the other thing, people taking matters into their own hands. So there's a lot of faith on his part, too, that they're going to follow along.
Well, yeah, as we find out. But of course, the person who actually does it is not actually in his chain of command.
Yeah.
So none of his people that he is actively the commander of did it. So the settlement has 1 day to live, and they've decided to do their planting day regardless. And Sisko decides to have everybody stay and help. There's a long sequence showing our heroes and the settlers planting the fields. The music here is very cinematic and different for Deep Space Nine, and there's a great, if you go on Memory Alpha, there's a great story about composing this music. Meanwhile, Worf gathers the Klingons and tells them they have one more enemy to fight. They're trying to plant their fields before the sun sets. Time is their enemy. We should help them defeat it. And I found this whole sequence super moving.
Me too, and I want to discuss that with you. I'm going to give you the word here, because I think you'll be more eloquent about it. Everything points to, if you just read this on the page, this being incredibly trite, incredibly rote, especially the beat here with Worf when he comes and he's like, they're facing time, and it should all of my life's pessimism and
right.
old man grouchy
Mike's cynicism
believes
of life.
that this should be trite, but it works.
It works, yeah.
It works on every level, and it really had me. Even though you know how this is going to end, you know it because of what we talked about, the like returning to status quo and all. You know how this has to pan out, regardless of the machinations of how that happens. For this moment in time, it felt, I don't know, just it was great. It was sweeping, it was moving, it felt earned. I guess that's the answer, really, is it was earned.
Yeah, it feels, and it's earnest in a way that doesn't seem manipulative, and I think that's what makes it work, right?
Yeah, it's not that show on ABC. What was that called? They're trying to make you cry with Mandy Moore.
Oh God, This Is Us.
Yes.
Never watch it, but yeah, it's because they could do this really weepy, right? But part of it is the score. Paul Bayargian, who composed this, did it as a jig, as a fugue, as a celebration musically, and everybody's take is, this is positive, this is celebration, this is not this slog of sadness. It is terribly bittersweet under the surface, especially like I think about the kids who don't know they're about to die. Everybody else does, but it's not played sad, it's played happy, and that's what makes it actually sad, I think, and that's what makes it work. And we don't, and I think the stakes here, we know that our heroes are going to make it, right? We know the heroes are going to make it. We don't really know if the people on the planet are going to make it.
Well, and I don't want to get too far into this, but I do want to. It did spark a thought when I was watching it, because, in fact, as Anne brought up in the pre-show, to continue our conversation about life, death, the afterlife, and such, atheism, you know, yes, we're playing this as if everyone's going to die at the stroke of midnight or whenever the thing happens, but the truth of the matter is there a difference between dying a mortal death and winking out of existence?
And never having existed.
Like a painful, like it's very much what an atheist would say. I'm not an atheist, I should say, but my understanding of atheism is that that's death, right? Is you just kind of...
Right. I don't care.
It's over, right? It's just done now.
Right.
That's sort of this experience they're about to have.
But on the other hand, if you're spiritual, is there a difference between dying and never having existed?
Then it's hard to.
Do you have a soul?
It's hard to marry that. And Kira sort of has a conversation about that in her fate. It's not that deep, but at least they do touch on it.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Fascinating. So at the end of the sequence, after talking to them, O'Brien breaks down and tells Sisko, we can't let these people die. So in Act 5, the tide has turned. They're going to sacrifice their future to save the colony. Which, for all of the parents, I think is the biggest sacrifice of all. For O'Brien, for Sisko. I think O'Brien in particular, obviously, because not only does he have kids, he has young kids. Jake is an adult at this point. Oh, it's got to be unbelievably difficult. And Planet Odo begs Kira not, or Zodo, sorry, Zodo begs Kira not to do this. And she says, this isn't about me. It's about the 8,000 people down on that planet and their children and their grandchildren. And Odo says, what about the children who will never be born because the Defiant doesn't go back to Deep Space Nine? She says, they don't exist yet. These people do. Oof. Then Odo says, Nerys, just tell me one thing. All right, here we go. If you'd known how I felt about you, if I'd said something years ago, do you think things might have been different? And she says, maybe.
Now, what's interesting here to me, makes even more fun, is we don't know. Spoiler alert for the next 3 minutes. Odo's the one who sabotages the plans. We don't know if he's done it yet. Maybe he's already done it. We don't know.
Ooh.
If he hasn't done it yet, then what comes out of Kira's mouth right here, unbeknownst to her, changes everything. Her maybe versus a no You're friend zoned.
Would it have changed Zodo's?
Because what he's basically saying is, you're saying there's a chance.
Yeah. And then he has to make this decision in a split second.
Well, if it's a maybe, then I have to I have to let the opportunity exist.
Maybe means it might be yes. Wow. Interesting. And then they kiss.
Oh, the picture got.
Oh, you gotta and yeah. So on Mike's watch along, Mike's face when they kiss. There it is. Wow. Mike was not exactly giving us Psyche in that during that watch along.
Yeah, it was more of it was Unabomber adjacent.
Unabomber Mike. Somebody make that custom.
Oh boy, don't.
Unabomber Mike?
Don't do it.
Yeah. So they kiss. Wow. So she leaves, and all of our heroes get ready to leave in the spaceship with the plan to recreate the accident and crash land. But before they do, they're going to send messages to their families, and before they zap themselves back in the time, which they do send.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm wondering, were they able to intercept that? Or does everybody there know that they chose to abandon them?
Even Gmail here, circa 2024, has has a minute and a half where you can unsend. So I feel like they got an unsend, a better unsend.
It is like the probe is like, warp 9, shoot it down. I bet that's what happened. So they send the message to the family. They head for the anomaly, all aware of what they're doing. And they set the plan on the autopilot of the ship to go into the anomaly and through the barrier. But then, of course, the ship veers out of the way. They go through the barrier and not back in time, getting away. Somebody changed the autopilot. And immediately, with no goodbye, with no nothing, the settlement is gone, never having existed. Cisco and Dax debate who did it. It had to have been a crew member, and they assume that it was Yedrin, like you said. But then, in Kira's quarters, our Odo enters, looking so shockingly different. Like, after having seen Zodo for so long, seeing this Odo was like, oh god.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, there's something you should know. The other Odo, the one from the planet, came to sickbay before he left the ship. He linked with me. Now I know everything that happened. They agree. And so they talk about their relationship first.
Well, why this is a better scene to me is than the one they cut, is there's a difference between her telling him and him being told by himself through the goo, because we know that's an experiential thing, right? So he not only does he know what happened, but he sort of was there too. He sort of got to sort of kind of live those moments.
Feel what Zodo felt.
Yeah, which is...
And did any of that confidence get past?
I'd argue that knowing that now, well, she learns, the truth that she learns here, now adds another layer of complication on top of this, because he probably feels a little guilty and she probably feels a little bit of anger.
Yeah. Complex. But they agree to just take some time to process all of this new info. And he just drops at the end, oh, also, it was Planet Odo who changed the flight plan and killed 8,000 people, including himself, to save Kira and perhaps give him a shot with Kira.
Just saying.
So, yeah, God, so much to... We'll try not to take up too much more of your time, but we need to talk about, a little after-show show.
AlamarEmmys, count to 4. AlamarEmmys, then one more. AlamarEmmys, AlamarEmmys.
right, so normally we'd be skipping wormholes at this point, but we have some from JD that I think are worth discussing.
Okay, just a moment then.
So here is what JD thought were going to be your wormholes.
Okay.
First off, the genetics of the situation. I.e., how much inbreeding would have had to happen would this have worked? But if just 5 of the officers on board were not human, and so that 40-something were, and Dr. Bashir's talent as a geneticist, he would have been able to diversify the gene pool to make sure no major mutation happened. Which I totally buy.
Yeah.
You're quiet? Talk some more.
Hey.
Oh, you just got quiet. I'll turn you up. And he continues, but then there is the business of should these people be meeting each other? Meeting each other because it does cause a paradox either way you look at it. This looks like a simple predestination paradox, but really, it's Polchinski's paradox minus the wormhole, where the action of A should by default stop A from taking action. But it's the same reason the grandfather paradox can spring off into the Hitler paradox. The act of trying to make time travel happen should in fact... Ooh, now I'm bouncing back.
Are you?
Yeah.
I think I
Weird.
know why that's happening, but hold on. Audio source should be microphone. Oh yeah, it all must have reset. Hold on. Sorry, buddy. Is that better?
Yo, so much better.
Okay.
Oh, welcome back.
Yeah.
So basically, the act of trying to make... Now I'm bouncing back again. The act of trying to make time travel happen could in fact stop time travel from happening, meaning any attempt to go back and do the thing ends up stopping you from going back and doing the thing. So we'll keep thinking about that one. But he continues, but the biggest wormhole, Odo. After the descendants had disappeared, young Odo comes and says he has all the memories of Daddy Odo, who was the one who changed the flight plan. If everything disappeared, this is interesting. How can memory remain if the memory never appeared? I would say the memory might have gone, I guess, under that principle, but Odo's memory of the memory would exist. So even if the thing hadn't happened, wouldn't his memory of the memory, I think, would exist. But it's interesting to think about. I guess it applies to everything. It's not just Odo's memory. All of our heroes would have, under that theory, forgotten the entire experience. But I think we are branching off a timeline as opposed to a straight continuation, I guess. Time travel.
Time travel.
Time travel. All right, let's go best moment.
Yeah, I think it's we discussed it. I think it's basically got to be that scene where they have this conversation in short, and they all have good arguments and pitch them, and then Ben says, "I'm just listening to everybody because it's important. Your feedback is valuable, but I'm gonna make this decision myself." I just thought that was a really well done scene where I just love that they didn't make O'Brien seem unreasonable, and
yeah,
maybe it's just my place in
a
life.
reasonable position.
Yeah, I thought that was I thought that scene was a good elevator pitch for the episode.
And great leadership from Cisco. For me, it's Farm Simulator. Like,
Yep.
I think that the sequence of them planting, and the Klingon part too, which could so easily be hokey. Like you said, the whole thing could so easily have tipped into being cheesy, and it didn't, and I found it moving. I find it moving every time. I've seen the episode 10 times at least, I'm sure, and I find it moving every time. And that's just good writing, good directing, especially under the ridiculous problems they were having in the production end of it.
Yeah.
So,
All right, shall we?
hats off. Let's do some self-stabbing stem bolts.
You get some stem bolts. Hell yeah, they are self-stabbing. Here are some stem bolts for you.
Zodo.
Zodo.
we've had quite a conversation. At the end of the day, this is one of those episodes where, yes, time travel has the unique benefit of, don't think too hard about it. You just kind of take it at face level and assume that there's stuff you don't understand, and you go with what you're given. And that's kind of how I feel. I love the complexity of this episode. I love a different sort of exploration of the railroad principle, right? And what's different here is that instead of, there's the good of the many, which is the people, but instead of the good of versus the good of the one, it's they kind of explode the one, right? It's you could argue that Kira is the one here, but it's also O'Brien and his family. It's also Jake, and it's also everybody back in the ship. And what I love is that it doesn't really take a principle. It doesn't really take a position. Yes, the heroes decide to make the hero sacrifice at the end, but it's not celebrated as such. It's sort of something they have to do, and they sort of decide to do democratically. And even then it's foiled. Yep. And when it's foiled, we don't celebrate, and we don't really, it's the whole thing is
bittersweet.
The whole thing is handled with almost a nihilism, that's just like this is just the way it is. That you don't really get a lot in like hero sci-fi.
Right. There's no hero path to take here.
And it's very Deep Space Nine. It's the part about Deep Space Nine that you said I would love, and I do love. And add on top of that some incredible character stuff for Renee, for Kira, for their relationship. I think it resets the table, but keeps it complicated. It could easily have had her fall in love with future Odo, who winks out of existence. Will I also fall in love with old Odo? No, she doesn't fall in love with anybody. It's just a door is opened, thoughts are considered, but now we also add complication because it's not just, oh, you loved me, but it's also you sacrificed a bunch of people for me. How do I feel about that? There's so much.
Well, and also, did you, or did a possible you, like how much responsibility you have for a possible version of you?
It also added an element to Dax we've never seen before, which was sort of a cocksuredness and some comeuppance because of that, which I thought was really interesting character for her. So much good stuff. I gotta tell you, I really liked this episode a lot. I don't know that it's a great episode by numbers. Like, I can't quite... I just watched it also. So I can't quite realize if I think the script is super great or if there are too many plot holes. I don't know. I haven't really been able to pass an adjudication on that. I just know that my feeling and the exploration of such, and even the conversation it led to, I really enjoyed. This one gets an A for me. I'm going to give it 92 self-sealing stem bolts. Yeah,
well, it's... We have time. Again, we have the time as a reference point, right? Mm-hmm. You watched the episode an hour ago. Mm-hmm. And I watched the episode, I've seen the episode multiple times for 20-something years. And to me, it holds up. To me, it really, yes, the how of the time travel is irrelevant, whatever, blah, 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 blah. The implications and how it works is, I think, fun. Mm-hmm. Just think through all the permutations and how it worked. Now, this, that, the other thing. I think that's the fun part. And what this episode has two things going for it. One, the time travel element, the great sci-fi, whatever, our descendants, how would it turn out if who, we have two characters who live for a long time, but they live for a long time in a very different way. How is the concept? That's really interesting. But you also have the moral quandary. And so to have both of those satisfyingly coexist in a single episode, along with a huge character story beat, pushing a story forward that has been sort of in the same place for seasons. We don't know what's going to happen. The characters don't know what's going to happen. We don't know whatever the consequences of this are going to be, but there's no going back. Unlike a lot of the time travel stuff, Kira knowing that Odo is in love with her is not going back in the bottle. That's not going to be put back in place. That is going to continue. we don't know what the consequences of that, but that changes their relationship forever. And their relationship has been one of the foundational relationships of the show. So the fact that that is now changed, I think is really, really interesting. So at the end of all that, I really find this a very satisfying episode. I look forward to it. I enjoy it. It makes me think. So I give it 94 self-sealing stem bolts. I think it's a rock solid, really fun, really heady episode. I was excited to get to it, excited to talk about it. I'm excited to find out what you guys think of this episode in the YouTube comments here below. Thank you so much for spending 2 hours with us on this episode. I can't believe it. We had a lot of nonsense, a lot of fun discussion. Thank you to JD for sending in some wormholes. If you would ever like to send a pre-buttal of an episode, you could always do that at lookatmystartrektoys@gmail.com. That goes right to me. Mike won't see it, which is probably the best.
I mean, Keith
version.
will take any butt to his email. Any butt you want to send.
Send me your butts. Send me your butts. Lookatmystartrektoys@gmail.com. All right, so in the world, just to finish up, this gets an 8.1 out of 10, which makes it the 37th best episode of Deep Space Nine on the IMDb. Next episode we're talking about is Blaze of Glory. Going to be fun. Thank you so much. Thank you for being patient with us, having an extra day on this episode. Oh,
Hi, Bobby.
and we have a puppy. Boy, you know, if you stuck around to the end, this is your reward.
Good girl.
Aw.
You just stick her in
Thank
the
you so
kitchen.
much.
Oh, go ahead.
All right,
Finish. Take us out.
Yeah, that's right. Puppy, too bad the puppy can't do the thing. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you back next week. Till then, this has been Keith and Mike Watch Deep Space Nine. Thank you for watching K&M Entertainment. If you enjoyed our particular brand of nonsense, please like and subscribe. Or become one of our patrons at patreon.com/KNM.
Any butt you want to send.
Send me your butts.